Hey everyone,
Hi.
Welcome to this week's Connect Group Bible Study. Tonight we're going to look at Acts chapter 2, verses 40 to 47, which is the passage that Miles spoke about on Sunday, which was Pentecost Sunday. Pentecost Sunday, one of the big highlights of the year, and it's also one of the main three festivals, and it's the only Christian big festival that hasn't been taken over by like consumer goods advertising. There's no like chocolate hippo of Pentecost yet, in the same way you get Easter bunnies,
Chocolate Holy Spirit.
and
That'll probably taste
chocolate
really good.
Santas. Yeah, chocolate Holy Spirit, maybe. Okay, so
It'd be like candy floss, wouldn't it?
anyway, we're going to focus.
We could totally brand this, guys.
Yeah,
Anyway.
okay. You can run with that if you want as a Connect group, but you need to give the money back. Okay, so
Tithe it in.
we're going to look at Acts chapter 2, verses 40 to 47, which is what Miles looked at on Sunday.
Scribble your question marks for any questions, exclamation mark for anything that stands out to you, and an arrow for anything you can apply to your life.
But why don't we start? Why don't you just read the first
We're going to do the
opening
intro
verses
first.
and
Okay,
describe
so
what happened at Pentecost.
Chapter 2, verse 1. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them.
So they are filled with the Spirit, they start speaking in tongues, people start to notice, and then Peter gets up. And what's amazing is only a few weeks ago, he denies Jesus to a little girl, and now he's standing up in front of a crowd of people and testifying and saying what he should have said to that little girl, to this crowd. And he gives this quite long sermon, and then we're going to pick it up at...
He's good at his long
pick it
sermons,
up at
this
verse
Peter.
40.
With many other words, he warned them and he pleaded with them, "Save yourselves from this corrupt generation." Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved.
Amen. So we're going to go. We're going to look at the 4 points that Miles drew out of this, but we'll do this slightly. We won't do them in order that they come in the passage because it makes a bit more sense with the questions. But first, we see just before we look at that is we read this: with many other words, Peter warned them and he pleaded with them. And what I love about this is that this is an edited summary of his talk. You know, this is the first sermon in the church ever gets, and yet the Spirit didn't record all of it. Sometimes preachers speak longer than the Holy Spirit thinks necessary. When that's me, I'm sorry. I just have to say, actually, my talks are shorter because you always check them first.
It's true.
And what's amazing here is those who accept his message, this message that he's spoken and baptized, about 3,000. And that's a contrast. When the law comes, 3,000 people are lost. And actually when the Spirit comes, 3,000 people are saved. That's what the Spirit can do. What the law, weakened by the flesh, could not do. And that's what we want the Holy Spirit to do in our city and in our lives.
Yeah.
So Miles pointed out, he said, look, this is what a Spirit-filled church looks like, and therefore this is what HDBB could look like. This is what your Connect group could look like. And so that's what we're praying for. So we read, first of all, they devoted themselves to 4 things. And Mars's first point was being committed. They devote themselves to the apostles' teaching. We do that through reading the Bible, simplest way, Bible in 1 year, can't say it enough. I'm just so surprised by the fruit that we see that through that, especially people coming out of Alpha. You read it every day. Not every day is amazing, but every day is adding to the reserves you have in your heart. And just find a way that works for you to get the Bible into your life.
And to those of your friends, like encourage each other, remind each other. Like, that should be the question when you meet up. Like, hey, how's Bible in 1 year going? Or how's Bible going at the minute? What are you doing?
And what's
That's
the
a really
Lord
good question.
saying
And what's the
to
Lord
you?
saying to you?
Then we read they're committed to fellowship. At first this is in the temple, but eventually they get kicked out and they have the fellowship at home, so they know what it's like to be stuck at home as well. And they commit to the breaking of bread, in other words, communion, the sacraments, these signs Jesus has given us that are places that he's promised to meet us and to fill us with his Spirit, and to prayer. And
24/7 prayer week. This week there's still some slots
no,
left.
there's no slots. It's all gone.
None?
Not all gone. But
I
obviously-
literally just got mine today, so I'm like...
But
in
the
there.
great thing is, because it's virtual, you can double
You can
up.
still
so you
double
can
up.
go on the website, get
Yeah.
the video. But being committed to prayer, and that's why we encourage you to pray in your Connect group as well, is so key. The other thing is that we see here, if I just jump down to the end and then I cough,
You're right.
it's not a dry cough, so we're all right. It's verse 46. Every day they continued to meet in the temple courts, and then they broke bread in their homes. And here you see that model of church, of gathered celebration like we do on a Sunday, but also dispersed devotion, this sort of spreading out into people's homes, both communal, but we see that modelled for there.
You're right there. Oh dear,
Yeah,
drama.
okay.
I love though. Didn't Miles say that on Sunday? Like that basically church now is sort of looking how it did then.
Yeah.
Like everyone in their homes. Like yes, we're sort of going back to our roots.
Yeah, we can edit this out later, but I'm slightly choking on like that nut. I just ate
That's
out
not
there.
good.
Yeah. They broke bread in their homes and they swallowed it properly. They ate together and they were glad in sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favour of all people. And so, first question really is this. Share something.
I meant to say the question.
Oh, yeah, okay.
He always puts in. Right. So, first question. Oh, my days. First question. We want you guys to just share something that you've received in this Connect group. Basically, something that you are grateful for in your Connect group.
So we hope that was really encouraging as you heard how the Lord is working through each of you in the community of your Connect group. So those were the first two things that Miles drew out. A Spirit-filled church is committed. It's also centered around community, but also they contribute. We read this in verse 44. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. And this is a really interesting just passage, that the response of being filled with God's love, of being filled with the Holy Spirit, is that they give. It's been said you can give without loving, but you can't love without giving. And as they start to love each other, they want to give towards each other. And so they hold everything in common. And really, this is a great way to view not just your money, but everything you have. The best attitude to money is that it all belongs to God, and we're just his stewards of it for a short time while we're on earth. And therefore, with all of our money, not just, oh, this is a little bit that's God's. With all of our money, we say to God, well, how much do you want me to spend? How much do you want me to save? And how much do you want me to give away? And really, that's the best way to think about everything we have, our time, our treasure, our talents, everything.
Belongs to God.
And believing this promise, Jesus says it is better to give than to receive. Now, you might ask how that works out. Do I need to go and sell all of my stuff now? And I think actually this is, you need to think about this and work this out. Like HTBB, we don't ask you to sell all your possessions and give it to us and put it in our bank account, because actually we think that you're probably better stewards of your money than we are, because none of us are bankers. Or, well, Michael Wu was a banker, but he's no longer a banker. So
But we're not bankers.
we're not bankers, definitely not. We are both trained in the arts, so would have no clue. So in practice, the way HTBB does it is you keep hold of your money and we keep minimal reserves. We keep a small amount of reserves to, as we need for cash flow to work, but we don't keep long-term reserves. If you stop giving, then the church stops doing what it does. Our reserves are in your accounts.
Yes.
Because you're a steward of the money that the Lord's given you. And we're so grateful that you've carried on giving giving of
Yeah,
not
thank you
just
so much.
your treasure, but also your time and your talents during this MCO period. But this is really interesting as well. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone in need. And I had a friend who I trained with at theology college. He ran a church on the Curry Mile in Manchester, and his church, having looked at this verse, they decided that they weren't going to have anybody in their congregation who was in need. And so they defined that need as this: everybody needed to have a house, clothes, food, but also a phone, not a smartphone, but like a phone you could text and receive calls on, and bus fare so you could get around the town, a set amount for the week. I think they could do a bus pass. And they made that commitment. Obviously in the UK, housing was provided by the state, and in some ways there's some benefits, but they said everyone in their community should be able to have this. And obviously there were then sort of things on how there's later Paul talks about those need to work and provide, but saying that that's what it meant, that nobody would be in need. And that's a really interesting to discuss and think about as a Connect group. How do we provide for the needs of each other, but also the needs in the community? And we know loads of Connect groups who've been supporting those some of the refugee families who've lost work in this season and paid rent and things like that to support
You guys are
people.
amazing to help support people like that. Yeah.
And a great quote that Miles used in his sermon from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a guy who was killed for his faith, for standing up against the Nazis. And he says this: the person who is in love with their vision of community will destroy community, but the person who loves the people around them will create community everywhere they go. And as you love, you give. So our second question:
where are you grateful for others' contribution? So that may be at HTBB, but also maybe in churches that you've been in the past, and communities you've been in the past. But
I'm really grateful for the youth leaders who, when I was 17 and 18, ran what must have been a really tough job, running a youth group for people who were partially interested in the Bible, mostly interested in trying to get a girlfriend or boyfriend, and really invested in our lives at a key time. So what are you grateful for? Things that of other people have given.
Discuss.
Great. And then lastly, Miles spoke about charismata, which is a word that can be used for the gifts of the Spirit and moving in the things of the Spirit. We read that everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. Now, it's interesting here to note, it doesn't use the word miracles, but wonders and signs, because miracles are signs that point you to Jesus and make you wonder about what he is like. That's the purpose of them. You know, the goal is relationship. Like, it doesn't matter how miraculous your healing is, at the end we all die. Like, Lazarus is dead.
He's dead now.
Like, he's dead. So the point is not the miracle itself. It's what it leads you to. Miles said this: miracles are not like parcels from Lazada that come disconnected from the sender. The power is in the presence and proximity to Jesus. That these are supposed to draw us to. And it's so exciting. We're constantly hearing of signs and wonders, of these things that are happening in our community that are drawing people to us. And sometimes they can seem... You know, sometimes we don't realise they're about to happen. Like
our Alpha group this time. So on the Alpha weekend, which has just gone.
Alpha weekend not away. Done virtually.
Yeah, virtually. We were like wrapping up and we were like, bye, see you later. Dan was like, thanks for coming, everyone. And our helper cut across and just said, I just feel like I need to pray for this particular thing for this person. We'd already prayed for that person. We'd all moved on. But our helper, amazing helper, was like, no, I just feel like I need to pray this to finish. And so she prayed this prayer over this girl in our group. And it turned out that was the most moving thing of the whole thing.
It was basically, the prayer was spot on. It was absolutely everything she'd been anxious and worried about.
She's been worried about that all week. We had no idea.
Like, wow. And she was like, wow, God knows me. He loves me.
Encouraging.
And
it was so good.
This group for me, and it was just amazing. And you know, that can seem, as you go to pray, it can seem quite normal, but actually it's something supernatural and wonderful. But also on the more extreme spectrum, Miles shared how there's a lady in the Mandarin congregation. She recently became a Christian, and she's had a curvature in her spine, and for 2 weeks her friends are praying for her every day, and the curvature in her spine is gone, and she can stand up straight, and the pain is gone. And you know, it's a wonder and a sign. It's a miraculous healing, but it points to the love of Jesus. Now the thing is, here it's performed by the apostles. Now it starts with the apostles, but it doesn't stop with the apostles. And Paul, we read later in 1 Corinthians 12 verses 4 to 11, speaks about, and this isn't even an exhaustive list, of all the gifts that the Holy Spirit gives us. Things like wisdom, knowledge, faith, miraculous powers, healing, prophecy. And basically the great thing about Connect Groups is this is the perfect place to practice and put these gifts into action.
Perfect place.
You know, and so
safe place.
Really, our closing question is this.
Which gift do you want to grow in? What areas are you wanting to grow in this list, for example? This isn't an exhaustive list, but looking at this, what do you want to grow in? And I want you to pray for each other. Yeah.
So which of these do you want to grow in? And then maybe you want to put into practice. If you've got a desire to move in the gifts of healing, and somebody in your group needs healing, have a go at praying for them. Prophecy, just speaking God's love, declaring God's love over people. All these things can be put into practice in a small group context. So Jesus often, when he meets people, says, "What do you want?" And so, what do you want? Ask Jesus for it, pray for one another, and then pray for each other to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And whatever else you need, bring it to each other and bring it to the Lord in prayer. And have a great week.
Have a great week.